So I've been doing a little bit more work on the interior as well, and it really is an interior now. You'll notice this far side is now enclosed. That's an MDF sheet there. I've got another one cut for this side which isn't fitted yet, but it's ready to go. You might also notice I've got this VR Insight panel mounted above the power quadrants. I thought I might as well do that. It's a catch-all really. I'm probably going to end up with some functions I haven't created buttons for, and that's a nice piece of kit. You know, it's really high quality, so I thought I might as well use that. The next thing I'm going to do, as you remember with the dash, it butts up nicely against the bottoms of the monitors. I want to do something similar at the top here. I know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to have 3 different panels. They're basically going to attach onto the structure just under here. They're just going to sit, you know, because there's an angle. You need an angle there. I'm going to let it find its own level, basically. Just attach them. So I have one central panel. Oops, there goes the tracker. One central panel, which is a square, a rectangle rather, and it'll just attach there, and essentially, I can't really show you what I mean here, but you attach there, and then it's just going to sit. I can't do it. Sit down like that, really. So it'll find its own level. Obviously, be the right width for the monitor, and then 2 more out at the sides. So that will give me an absolutely watertight forward view, which is devoid of any distractions. And same at the sides. The sides, ultimately I want these to be black. Well, just another quick update. I've been fitting the I suppose blanking plates that go at the top of the screens that join the panel onto the tops of the monitors. Not sure how well you're going to see this, but this is basically what completes the feeling of being enclosed in the cockpit. So there's no, I mean, the idea is there's no light visible up here between the cockpit frames and the monitors. And you should notice the track IR mounted in the middle here. Quite a nice snug mounting there. It's poking through a hole in the top plate. In fact, I'll have a look at that from the upper side in a second. So here's that from the top of the cockpit. You can see these are the blanking plates here. Well, there's actually 3 plates, 1, 2 and a far one I can't reach. That middle one's got the track IR mounted on. You should, if I zoom in, you should be able to see the track IR spider mount there. So that's quite a neat mount. It's not very secure at the minute. I've got to secure that in position somehow, probably with a blob of blue tack is how I'll do it. Nothing sophisticated there. That's just a wider view of the top of the cockpit. You can see it's a bit messy behind. Not really any reason to make this any less messy. So another milestone, I've just finished wiring up the first panel completely, and that includes the bod and award end. This is the link cable which goes to it's the Autopilot panel. So really, literally all that remains to do is to plug this into the panel, which I've remounted, and fire up FSX, and I should be able to program this panel through FSUIPC and so on. The only thing that I'm unsure of at the moment is this link cable. I haven't tested this. I've tested the tail that feeds out of the panel into the female RS232 connector, and all those connections were fine, so I've no reason to doubt any of the solder connections on here, but it's always possible. But I thought the easiest way to test that is simply to plug it in and wiggle the buttons, and then I'll see them change in FSUIPC. That's much better than mucking about with multimeters. So that's what I'll do next, and we can go and fly with the Autopilot. Alright, so I'm sitting in the Twin Otter and I have plugged in the Autopilot main panel for the first time ever. I've just set up the encoders using the Leo Bodner encoder configuration utility, and I'm going to run up the FSUIPC configuration, buttons and switches, and check that we've got everything connected. So I'm just going to flip switches and things should happen. There you go, joystick 0, button 19, button 16, 24, 13, 5. Well, it's working, it's responding. I mean, that's the autopilot engage test, autopilot test, button 12, autopilot engage, button 11. So it's working basically. So that's just a complete success. You know, the first time every switch works. I mean, part of that's due to, you know, careful soldering and diligent quality control, I've got to say. But it's worth reiterating, really, just what's going on here. You know, some people have been a little bit intimidated at the scale of this kind of project, but you know, there's no electronics as such involved here at all. This is all, you know, essentially it's taking these individual switches, toggle switches and so on, which are just two wires, and connecting them to the inputs on the bottom board. Everything else is just a roundabout way of making that happen. So they're all mounted on this, you know, fairly nice looking panel. But at the back of this panel, as I said, you know, apart from that, I've mounted the speakers on here as well, which there's a bit of electronic stuff goes with that, but it's not, you know, I didn't originate that. I just pulled it out of something else. So it's all in the detail of, you know, it's wiring, end-to-end wiring, and connectors and solder joints. There's nothing to that, really. You know, anybody can do that. It's just a question of taking care, taking time, attention to detail, planning. Obviously planning in great detail goes a long way to ensuring a good outcome. The other thing just to mention, I mean, this hopefully came across when I was showing the wiring up of this panel. You know, originally I was presuming that you needed, for each switch, obviously there's two wires comes from each on-off switch, and I was presuming those two wires had to feed all the way through to the controller board. But with a little bit of thought, that's not how it is at all. They all, as I said earlier, use a common ground. So if you're connected to one ground on the board, you're connected to all the grounds, and that means you only need to send one wire from the panel to connect to the ground connection. That makes sense in my head. Hopefully that makes sense as it comes out of my mouth. And what that does is, according to my original estimates, it divides into the number of wires that have to go between the two. It doesn't it doesn't reduce the number of solder joints you have to do behind the panel, because you do obviously have to solder onto each of those switches on both terminals. But what you do is you connect the grounds together in a loop, or a bus if you like, and then you just tap off at one point the ground wire. Where you really benefit from that is in the connector. So I've got the connector, the RS232 connector that can basically break the panel apart from the controller. That you do essentially halve the number of solder joints you need in there by only having one ground wire. So I imagined for this panel I was going to have to solder 50 connections, and I only have to do 26, which is 25 plus 1.